Like last time, I think it'd be good to just start with a little prayer. I'd like to be able to do that. So, Heavenly Father, Jesus, we thank you for this opportunity. We thank you again for creativity. I thank you for your own creativity that's just so wild. It's not something that we can contain, kind of like watercolor. And the same way we kind of learn how to work with you, Lord, and with your plan, and we find beauty in that. It's the same with watercolor. So this is kind of a cool revelation of that, and we give you thanks for that. So, amen. All right. Now I have to find my screen here. I've tried different views to be able to get closer for you guys to be able to see, and to be able to see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to talk about a few things first, and then I'll demonstrate painting my own picture, which is this one right here, which I had drawn last time. And but I'll go over just a few things first on this one, this mess, and then hopefully we'll be able to get a sense of where to go with that. So just want to point out on this one here first, I don't know if you remember me showing you that and working with it. That's where we were trying to do the salt. And this is, you would call this overworked. As you remember, I kept going back to it and trying to demonstrate because I felt I was running out of time and I was pushing it and rushing it. And watercolor, as it's drying, it comes to a point where you can push it too far, and then you get this chalky sort of look to it, which personally I find unattractive. It's just not as vibrant as, let's say, something more like this with the tree here, where it doesn't have that chalkiness. It's still vibrant and rich, or this tree down here, okay? So these are those little tiny demos that I was doing because I was trying to keep that video short. You can see how colors run into each other, and it's a bit messy and sloppy looking, but depending on your own personal preference, you might like that style. And then I did this other one. So this is basically all we'll be working at today, though, is just these simple shapes, laying the colors in, trying in every single place, if we can, get more than one color laid in there, okay? Even in this background, the purple, that was a happy accident. The purple ran from here and it ran into the back one. And personally, I kind of like that happened, okay? So before we get started, I want to explain a couple of things to you, which is the importance of knowing when do we want a soft edge like this here, where a color softly blends into another color, and when do we want something a little more hard, like if we look at this one here, we have some nice hard edges, and sometimes we want these hard edges and sometimes we want them soft. And you have to decide when do we want that. And it's important to know that. So even knowing the technique is not enough. So you can know how to do the technique, but if you don't know when you apply the technique, when is it proper, you just still sort of end up with a mess. And variety is always key. So I've seen people do watercolor where everything is soft edges. There's no hard edges at all, and it's, I don't know, it loses punch. I guess that's the only way I can say it for myself. So let me explain something. So if this is okay with you to do a little drawing explanation here. How does an artist see? I've taught a lot of drawing classes as well. And basically, this is just a foundation of some understanding when you go into working on your own watercolor. So I want to just quickly go over that. Hopefully I won't take too long with that. Okay, so I try to come to an understanding of how to shift over to see differently, to see as an artist sees. And one of the things, the way an artist sees, is an artist sees everything whether they've been taught or they just do it naturally, they see everything as broken down into four basic forms, we call them, okay? So everything can be broken down into either cylinders, a cylindrical shape, spheres, spherical shape, cubes, and cones, okay? Just a second, yeah. Oh, shoot, okay. Here, everyone, I have a moment here. Just a second. Resume, there we go, thank you. Okay, we're back on recording again. Okay, so back to the basic forms. Now, why do we care about this? Since we're not drawing, we're just painting. What does that matter? Basically, it matters because I'm going to explain to you about when do we do hard edges and when do we do soft edges, okay? Basically, it's really simple. And anything that is round is going to have a soft edge. So if we take the cylinder, for example, again, we're always thinking everything in highlights and shadows. We always, we break everything down to, and that's really what you're creating with your light and dark, with your paint, with your colors, is light and shadow. So on a cylinder, for example, because this is round, it's very important that our highlight and shadow come together in a soft edge, where one fades in a gradation into the next, okay? As opposed to this, where we have a hard edge, it's a corner. So basically, if you have anything with a corner, that would now need to have a hard edge. It has to suddenly change. So inside, so if I make this look hollow, you can see this has to suddenly change from there to there. I can show you better with this cube. So again, cylinder goes dark and it slowly gets light, and that's going to feel round. So if you're doing wet and wet and you're making one of your colors have a soft edge, it's going to make it feel like that whatever it is you did is round and smooth. As opposed to something that has a corner, you have to have that transition. It has to be a hard edge. It has to suddenly change, okay? So that's just the main thing that I'm trying to show you. And then a sphere, once again, because it's round, you have to have very soft edges. So as we go through that, so once again, that has a soft edge. A cone, again, is going to have a soft edge because it's round, as opposed to if we put these two shapes together, we get a pyramid. So again, anything with a corner is going to have a sort of hard edge, okay? Now, why do I explain that? If we go back to this, all right? So this is a beautiful sort of nice soft edges here, but in reality, I would not leave this for my tree because it ends up looking more like a cotton ball shape, okay? Now, if you're trying to create that sort of sense, if you're trying to do a painting where you want everything to feel really just soft, and you're trying to create a feeling, an emotion of just soft and peace, and then you might purposefully do that, okay? Because again, when we're doing art, it's not just about copying. As an artist, you make your own choices. This, because leaves are full of hard edges, I've thrown in some hard edge here. So that's why this one ends up taking on a little bit more of a realistic sort of feel, because after the first layer was dry, I went back in when it was dry, so I did a wet on dry, and I end up with these hard edges here, okay? In a mountain, this mountain has a bit of a soft sort of feel, okay? You can see the gradation, but I have some harsh edges, I have some really hard edges here, so that helps keep a sense of that it is a bit jagged. Now this one here, because I went back and created all sorts of textures touching it, it just automatically created all these hard edges, okay? Because once I remove some of that water, some of the wetness, then the colors don't run into each other anymore. So that's going to have much more of a jagged sort of feel. This bottom one, again, has a little bit of that as well. The trees, because these trees are distant, we lose the details, so we can leave it all soft edges, and it'll feel like trees in the distance. But again, a tree close up, we might not want to do that, not necessarily, okay? So this last mountain, again, on this side, because I'm trying to just limit it and keep I want my painting to feel simple, then this has some soft gradation happening. But here I created some texture, so I had to wait for it to dry, put it in, and I end up with hard edges to my shapes. So this suddenly changes to that one there. This is a nice soft edge because it's in the background. So I just wanted to make sure you guys understood that. When do we go soft? When do we work on wet surface? And when do we work on a dry surface, okay? Because that is always key. Remember, as I mentioned, you're either rushing, hurry up, get that paint down while the surface is still wet, or you have to be patient and wait until it's dry. So, okay. All right, I should have mentioned this last time. I wish I didn't, but I want to just put a little plug, a little advertisement for what I think is some of the best watercolor brushes ever. And when I first started watercolor, I used only these. This is one of those Chinese brushes, right, that they use for writing with, right? They're usually working in ink, so it's a Chinese lettering brush. But they sell them often also as watercolor brushes. And what is beautiful about these is it's nice and big, but look at the beautiful point it comes to. So when I first started watercolor, I did everything outdoors, and I didn't want to carry a whole bunch of stuff with me. So I carried one brush, and I would do my entire painting just with one of these Chinese brushes. So let me just sort of show you what I mean. So I'm gonna today try and do my whole thing with just the Chinese brush. So again, those are new. I use my eyedropper because then I can get lots of color, or get my paint, as we said, nice and juicy. So I'm not working with just little smears. What colors do I want to use today? So I'm thinking about, I have different blues. I want to try a couple of different blues. This one's really harsh, or really, really strong. Some colors, like, you barely need any pigment and they're so strong. So I'll just start with that. I can add more later on, okay? So my brush, I'm gonna bring it here. Okay, so it's wet, it's to a nice point here. Pick up some of my color. And what I like about doing this is, because it's so thick, it holds a lot of paint in it, okay? That's a bit faint, but you can get these beautiful details. I need more paint there, as you can see. Let's get a little bit more paint. Oh, I got so much it's not coming to a point. So let me move a little closer so you can see. And so this is my light blue, but you can do very large areas and then very tiny little areas here. So I'm going to work at that. All right, so let me quick demo some of this, and then I'll have you guys go ahead and begin on your own. So to begin, once again, I'm going to work with this blue. I'm going to spin my palette around here so it's a little closer to me. And I like this. This is cerulean blue. I'm going to work with this, but just to add some interest so it doesn't just become flat, I'm going to also bring in another color. I'm going to squeeze that out, get as much paint back in there as I can. Skies, by the way, are always darker at the top, and they fade to light near the bottom. Okay, so this is a phthalo blue, or Prussian blue, I mean. It's really, really strong. But that's nice. Okay, that's good. So I have it, I'm not hardly going to mix that up, but I'm going to bring in that blue as well into it. Okay, so again, I always test my colors first. I'm going to squeeze out the excess. The reason I always squeeze out the excess is otherwise, if I don't, half my paint goes into my container of water here, and my container of water just gets so dirty so quick. Okay, so I could go over this with clear water if I wanted to. I'm not going to bother with that. I have a nasty fold, wrinkle in my painting here. I got something come up here. Oh, looks like I might cut out the meeting here. Something about I may need to upgrade. So, all right. So this is a fairly rough paper, which creates these wonderful edges to my shapes as well. So I'm laying this in. This is right away imagining where my clouds are. I didn't paint in the clouds, or sorry, draw them in with the ink pen. I didn't want to. So right away, get lots of paint in there so you don't get harsh edges. So I'm doing a large area, so I have to keep an eye on this area here, these edges, and at the same time, I got to keep going back over here, or I'm going to get hard edges. Now I want some hard edges for my clouds, but I want my sky to fade down. So now I'm going to grab my tissue here. So I've dried off my brush mostly, and now I'm going to pull this down, and it will fade out, hopefully, into a soft gradation. So my sky will be lighter at the bottom and darker at the top. So now I'm working with a very pale blue, and it's bolder up top here. And now I'm going to I'm going to bring in this other blue just to add a little bit of difference. So it's not just a solid flat color. Ooh, that starts to turn into maybe a little bit of a stormy sky. So you can see I'm really avoiding painting in straight lines as well. I don't want straight lines. It just doesn't do it for me, okay? By the way, never let your paper get a wrinkle in it. You can see that fold and everything is running into there. Okay, so now I've got this over here. So now I have to try and carry this soft gradation down here. So I can bring in a little bit of water, soften this up, my edge, going back in here while it's still wet. Again, I got to catch that edge. I don't want any nasty hard lines in my sky because I don't want my sky to look straight. The only hard edges I want are around my clouds. So this side here needs a little bit more. So while that's wet, I can bring some of that in. But now it's too dark near the horizon line. So I can pick some of it back up again. So I've dried my brush, I've removed it, the paint, and I can go back in. And at some point I have to stop, okay? So this paper, it's just kind of a scrappy paper that I was using. It's very textured, so you can see it's going to create that. So that's why they make different types of watercolor paper. They make hard press and cold press, and that is just a personal preference. Okay, so I now have to let this dry. I have to let that dry. So why don't we do this? While that's drying, I'm going to switch over to a gallery view. And I don't know if there's a way for you guys to be able to work on probably the sky. I'd say just start off with the sky. You don't have to use blue. You're the artist. So if you want to make it more of a, you know, a pink or a purple sky, that's totally fine as well, right? Like, you know, depending on what you guys want to do. So you don't have to necessarily try and hold your phone or your camera in one hand while you're working, but at some point, if I can see, then I can make comments on what it is that you guys are doing. Okay, does that make sense? So since you're all muted, well, yeah, so if you have any questions or something like that, go ahead and just unmute yourself if there's something you're not sure of what to do. Otherwise, you can give me a thumbs up and go for it. I think most of you guys are already. So if I switch you over to gallery view, I can see each of you, what you're doing. And then, yeah, just work with the sky. And maybe even while you're doing that, I'll keep kind of playing around with my own here. And I'm going to try something. I'm going to try bringing in a little bit of magenta just for fun. Because we want to keep alive the fun part. We're not going to get so caught up in that everything has to look realistic. Experimenting is the best way to learn anything, right? So my magenta is really strong color. So I'm going to, let's pretend that there's just a little bit of a sunset or something happening. Sunset, sunrise. So just a little something on composition. If you guys are listening while you're working on your own, where I put this new color is going to make a difference actually, because it's contrast. It's something that's different. So it's going to stand out and it's going to draw attention to itself. So I'm putting it right by the lighthouse because that's the focal point of my seascape here. And so that's where I would want to put it because this pink color is going to draw the eye. If I go decide, oh, I want to put my sunset colors over off to the left-hand side or the right-hand side, well, that's one thing, but you don't want to draw the viewer away from your focal point. You want to draw them to it. Okay. That's a bit bold. We'll throw a little bit of color in my clouds here.
Rick, I do have a question.
Okay.
Can you give us a link to that brush?
Like where to find it?
Right.
Yep, I can do that. Really, any art store is going to have it. You're probably like
For Amazon.
Yeah, any like here on the island, Akamai Art would definitely have a brush like this. You can definitely, if you go online, I mean, I could give you a link, but I'm not sure which. I could link you to Amazon, which would be a quick way if you want to order online.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you just type in Chinese watercolor brush, I'll do that. I'll go and type one in, do a little exploring, see if I find one that looks like a good one. Then I'll do that. So that's good.
Yeah, that'd be ideal.
Awesome.
Anyone have anything going on with your sky that you want to angle your thing? Don't forget to stop. Okay?
I did mine, so I'll share. Oh shoot, I'm trying to show you the one I'm drawing from because it's very different from your sky. Mine's just very
Yeah.
soft. So I was trying to do a soft wash.
Yep, exactly. Very good. Yeah. And so now if you want your if you wanted to get some of that orange, and that's a beautiful wash, by the way, if you wanted to get any of that orange to blend in, you would want to do that while it's still wet. So see how that's all soft? You would have to try
in the clouds area.
Yeah, so it's hard to tell from the photo if it's fading into it. So you can still, as you put it in, it's just going to have, oh yeah, it looks more like clouds actually. So then,
yeah,
so
that's
it's
my
going to,
clouds. I haven't painted that area. That's still white.
Yeah.
So that would be my question is like, which do I paint first for the clouds, I guess? How do I layer these clouds?
Well, if you look at your clouds, it looks like there's kind of some orangish, yellowish, and some purples in there.
Yeah.
Some bluish purples. So this is going to be your, but they're all very soft, right?
Right.
And if you're trying to create a very sort of peaceful, soft feel to your landscape, you're going to want to keep those soft edges. So that means you have to work on wet surface, or at least have your colors come near each other and softly blend into each other. If you wanted to make it more like a dramatic, you know, sometimes you get those dramatic clouds, then you would purposefully leave some hard edges and you